The Talmud tells us that King David HaMelech, he was in the bathhouse. And in the bathhouse, a person not permitted to study Torah. You're not permitted even to meditate in Torah. And he's unclothed. And he realized he's totally detached from mitzvahs. In Hebrew, the word, he was naked. Arum. Arum means naked. He was stripped of mitzvahs. Meaning in that location, he had no environment, mitzvah environment. Until all of a sudden, he noticed his circumcision. He was circumcised. When he noticed that, he expressed himself. And this verse we say at the time of, when we blow the shofar for Rosh Hashanah. He said, Sasa nochi ala mersecha k'motzei shalom rav. Sasa nochi, I rejoice over your words as if I've come upon great spoils. He said it, he was ecstatic. Sos anochi al imrosecha k'motzei shalom rav. I rejoice over imrosecha, your words, the words of the Torah, as if I've come upon great spoils. Now, we find that when King David speaks about the value of Torah, he says, Tov li Torah's picho, the Torah of your mouth is good. To what extent? If you want to quantify it, ka'alfei zov v'chesef, like thousands of talents of gold and silver. So David, when he quantifies Torah, it's by speaking about a precious metal, gold and silver. It's the equivalent of thousands of talents of gold and silver. And yet, when he saw his circumcision, that he was circumcised, he says, Sosa nochi al mersecha, I rejoice over your words of Torah as if I've come upon great spoils of war. It's something he captured. Spoils his booty, something he captured in war. Why exactly did he use that terminology? The circumcision was motzei shalom rav. I've come upon great spoils of war. So somebody asked me this question. A grandson of mine asked me this question, which he'd heard the question from someone else, and he had no answer. So he asked me, what do I think? So the first thing that came to mind when he asked me the question was this. We had once mentioned the Ohr HaChaim HaKodesh cites a Zohar. The Zohar says, when God created Adam, he was created without a foreskin. He was created in a circumcised state. He had no foreskin. How did the foreskin develop? When he ate the fruit of the tree of knowledge, which God referred to as tov v'ra, it's good and evil, that was the expression of the evil which he integrated into his being. The foreskin grew as a result of that. Okay? That's what it is. Now, what is a foreskin? It's a covering. It's covered. What does a covering connote? It causes something which is unclear. You don't see something fully exposed, you don't see what it is, because it's covered. How do you realize what it is? You uncover it. As we say, don't judge a book by its cover. Right? You know, I look at Larry, you think he's the chief rabbi of I don't know which country, Luxembourg. You know, maybe Scandinavia, maybe the Bering Strait. They just opened, an outlet for the UN over there. I'm not sure. Okay, Eskimos and Seals, chief rabbi. Okay. So something which is unclear, lacking clarity, maybe a distortion, is covered. I'll give you an example. The Talmud tells us, we read at the beginning of creation, at the end of each day of creation, it says, Vayerev vayivoker. It was evening and it was morning. So the Gemara tells us, the Talmud tells us, Vayerev ze olam hazeh. Erev is this world. The physical world is Erev. Boker is olam haba. That's the world to come. That's after the coming of Mashiach. What does that mean? So, Rabbi Lutzato, the Ramchal, writes in his work, Path of the Just, what is nighttime? Nighttime, because there's a lack of light, when you're at a distance of something, you notice something, you think it's one thing, and as you get closer, you realize it's something else. He gives an example. You see from a distance, it looks like a person. As you get closer, you realize it's a pillar, or vice versa. So what is the lack of light? It causes a distortion. It's a distortion of reality. There are many things in the physical existence because we are physical beings, and we have all kinds of drives, which are physical drives, which are contradictory and contrary to our spiritual essence. Because of those conflicts, we don't see things at what they are. Therefore, everything is distorted. We see wrong as right and right as wrong. But that's this world. This is post eating of the tree of knowledge. Because the moment that evil became integrated in our being, we became addicted to evil. We were drawn to evil, whatever that represents. But if you see evil to be evil, you don't go near evil. So what does it create? What does the evil create? It creates a conflict, and that conflict causes it to see things through a distorted lens. We lack clarity. The example, a person, God forbid, is a drug addict. He could read about the consequences of taking drugs in every sense of the word. But when he starts craving for that drug, whatever he read, whatever he knows, whatever he experienced in the past, it has no relevance to that moment. Because he's so overwhelmed and subsumed by that craving, he becomes totally irrational. Doesn't function rationally. Regardless of the cost. God forbid he may even kill for that. He'll steal. He'll justify many things. That's how needy he is. Once he has his fix and he somehow gets back to normal and he looks himself in the mirror and he understands what he's doing to himself and to his family and to his children and all the consequences of this kind of involvement, he regrets, he has remorse. But the moment he craves again, it's like it never happened. No remorse, no regret. He's fully there to partake of it. That's the nature of a human being. After Adam ate of the tree of knowledge and he integrated that evil, which is evil on the absolute level, into the being that all mankind became tainted with that evil, each one of us are inclined and have cravings for these things which are contrary to our spirituality. That's the concept. The only way you're able to deal with this to a degree, you have to spiritualize yourself. God gave us an antidote. What's the antidote called? It's called Torah. As the Talmud tells us in a number of locations, I've created an evil inclination, but the antidote to it, that neutralizes it, is the Torah itself. Why does the Torah neutralize that evil inclination? Because ner mitzvah Torah or. The Torah itself is an illumination. We don't see things for what they are, but when you study Torah, it connects you to the spiritual, it spiritualizes us. We see it at arm's length, and when you're able to see it at arm's length, as a result of that, you can appreciate why you shouldn't go near it. And as a result of that, the more you study, the more mitzvah you do, our physicality becomes spiritualized. The more spiritualized we become, we're less inclined to go there. The challenges become different challenges. It's no longer whether I do that earthy, mundane act. It's even when I do the spiritual, do I do the spiritual well enough, perfect enough? Whole different challenge, different reality. But where did it all begin? It all began with the tree of knowledge. So the covering which is the foreskin, which was a result of the evil inclination. What does that covering represent? Things cannot be seen clearly. In Hebrew, the word for world is olam. Olam is the world. The root of the word olam is helem. The word helem in Hebrew means concealed. The world is concealed. What we see, it's not what it is. Everything is distorted. And that's as a result of what? Of Adam's eating of the tree of knowledge. The only philosophical argument in the Talmud is one philosophical argument between the house of Shammai and the house of Hillel. Was it best for man to be created or best man not to be created? That's the question. God created the human being. Was it best to be created or best not to be created? If you take a poll of people's success or failures, most people fail. They succumb to the challenges. So if that's the case, clearly it confirms it's best for man not to be created. But they debated this issue for 2.5 years. Was it best to be created, not to be created? There was a consensus after 2 years, 2.5 years, it would have been best not to be created. Because if you look at the numbers, most people fall through the cracks. Most people are just sucked into that quicksand of desire, and they can't pluck themselves out. It's best for man not to be created. So I asked the question, which I think is a very fundamental question. If God created the world, and it says after he created, at the end of creations, all God says, all that he created, he saw was tov ma'od. It was very good. So if God is putting a stamp of approval, it's very good. Where do we have the audacity to say, you know something? It's disastrous. It would have been best that he shouldn't create. These are the greatest rabbis in the Talmud. That conclusion after 2.5 years debating this issue, it would have been best they shouldn't be created. How could you say such a thing? God said it's the ultimate, couldn't do better. And we go and say, you know, by the way, it's a disaster. It would have been best man's for not to be created. And proof of the pudding is, you see, people's records, most of them have failed. So how do we reconcile this issue? God says, Hine tov ma'od, and simultaneously, the Talmud says it would have been best man for not to be created. God created the world. When he created the world, it was nearly perfect. It was not tainted. It was not tainted. That world God created initially before Adam ate of the tree of knowledge was very good. You have a healthy person. This man has potential. He could be anything he wants to be. He has full control over his behavior. He makes one mistake and he takes heroin. All that potential goes out the window. What God created was very good. Man messed up. Adam, by eating of the tree of knowledge, he putrefied existence. This new existence that we have to deal with. Is it worthwhile? Not worthwhile. So what God said initially, all that he created was very good, exceptionally good. That was pre-tainting, being tainted, pre-putrefaction. The good and evil was discernible. The world was not a distorted lens. You saw things for what they were. The challenge was a simple challenge. Once you become that addict, addicted to evil, then it's very complicated. And that new context, most people don't make it. And that other context is the way to survive it. So unless you know how to survive it, you can't survive it. And they tell you how to survive it. Because they said, if that's the case, most people fail. So how do you deal with these issues, with all these Achilles heels, with all these blind spots? So they explain, before you do anything, you have to make an evaluation. Is it right or wrong? And don't act by impulse or reflexively, make an evaluation. And even if you make the evaluation, it's right, make another evaluation. You know, drug companies, to be able to receive the authorization from the government, you know how many trials they have to go through till finally the drug is proven to be an effective drug? But it seems to me it is. The manufacturer wants to be approved a lot earlier. He has to spend endless millions of dollars to run it through tests to prove it is absolutely that. Otherwise, he doesn't get the approval, doesn't get the FDA approval. That's the way it works. But why? The answer is because you deal with a drug which has to deal with a problem, unless it's at that special level of confirmation, we're not giving our approval. There is a way to deal with it. You have to first make an evaluation. You have to reflect. You're walking on an area where there's quicksand, or an area where you have mines, a minefield. And if you're really cognizant where you're walking, and you take a course in survival going through minefields, even without the mine detector, you're able to make it to the other side of the field. But if you just rush through the field without being cognizant of every pace you take, every moment, God forbid, you're going to be blown to smithereens because you're going to step on a mine. That's exactly what life's all about. You have to be knowledgeable. You have to be deliberate. You have to be focused. And that's all within the ability of the human being. The question is, do we take advantage of those abilities, or we go because of our desires to do what we want to do, we go head over heels. It's like jumping into a pool that says no diving, depth 3 feet. And he notices, but he doesn't read the sign, doesn't read it. He sees water, he goes head first, God forbid. That's life, what it's all about. But you have the ability. If you're more deliberate and you reflect and you don't are drawn reflexively, you could come out on the top. So despite all the shortcomings, but most people, they prefer to what? To be drawn after their desires. The desires dictate their lives, rather they themselves dictating their lives.